Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Chatham House. I'm delighted to be able to welcome you here for this meeting with Bruno Le Maire, the Ministry for Economy and Finance in the government of Monsieur Edouard Philippe, and obviously President Macron. I'll let people find seats. There's a couple left maybe here on the far right, though I think we still have some of the delegation to get in. The timing, obviously, of this meeting could not be better. France, the UK, and the EU, what the future holds, and there could not be a better person to give this talk at the moment. Bruno Le Maire has had a long-standing political career, served in the advisory functions initially in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs when M. de Villepin was the Foreign Minister of France. He joined Prime Minister Dominique de Villepin at Hotel Matignon, first as advisor, then as his Chief of Staff, was elected as a MP, as a member of the Assemblée Nationale in June 2007, became the Minister of State for European Affairs briefly in François Fillon's government before then becoming Minister of Agriculture. And having continued his political career, he is now part of a government that is truly transforming France and is transformative of France, but also potentially is going to be transformative for the European Union as well. Inevitably, here in the UK, we're very interested to know how transformative it will be for the UK-EU relationship as well, Monsieur Le Maire. But with a title such as France, the UK, and the EU, what the future holds, we should be able to cover a broad range of topics. We will have some prepared remarks, and then there will be a chance for some Q&A. But let me just say in advance, if I could ask you to try and stay in your seats at the end of the session, because Monsieur Le Maire has to get out very promptly at the end of this meeting. It is on the record. It is being live streamed. I'd like to welcome our Chatham House members who are joining us outside this room, and you can tweet at CH Events with the hashtag. Monsieur Le Maire, welcome to London, but welcome to Chatham House in particular. We look forward to your remarks. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind words, ladies and gentlemen. Last time when I came here in Chatham House, I was in charge of European affairs in the government of François Fillon. And there was, I think, around 10 people in the room. Now that I'm in charge of finance, there are around 100 people in the room. So obviously the British people give more importance to finance than to Europe. From Paris, it seems the United Kingdom has been consumed by one issue since June 2016. And we can, of course, understand why. Brexit. Brexit is an important issue for your country. As far as France is concerned, and I explained that many times, we deeply regret the decision taken by the British people to leave the EU, but we respect this democratic choice. It is sad to see a close ally and partner leave the EU after 40 years of a mutually beneficial union. It is sad to see your country step out of a common market that it helped design. But it is a fact, and we have to do with facts. And the world did not stop on June 23rd, 2016. Life goes on. Now that the referendum is over, we need to move on. Yes, Brexit will have consequences, important consequences for the UK, for France, and for Europe. But we should not see the future of the UK or the future of our relationship only through the prism of Brexit. We always had a very important bilateral relationship, and my goal is not only to maintain, but to develop and to reinforce the relationship between the UK and France. Our common history and our ties go much further than that. The UK and France can do a lot together to face global challenges such as climate change, the fight against inequalities, defense and security. On all those topics, we have a lot to do together. We stand firm in our promotion of fair trade and of a rules-based order at a time when some countries are calling this into question. That is why I came here today, to explain what is going on in France, how Europe is changing, and how we see our shared future in the world. In France, we were faced with a choice similar to yours in 2017. Of course, the Brexit referendum and our presidential election were not one and the same thing. But when you look at the issues underlying both votes, you can observe many similarities. They were about determining the long-term future of our countries, whether to trust in the EU and to strengthen it, or to split from the European project. We, the French people, could have followed a similar road as you. We should never forget that at the second lap of the presidential election, you had on one side Emmanuel Macron and Europe, and on the other side, Marine Le Pen and a kind of Brexit. The French people made a different choice. They decided to try something totally new. A young president has been able to convince men and women from different political parties to work together to transform our country. And more unusual still these days, a leader who openly campaigned on a pro-European platform, who offered to embrace globalization as an opportunity and not to go back to inward-looking strategies. This leader has been elected. So now we have a clear choice in France, a clear majority, and a clear vision for the future of France, the future of Europe, and our place in the globalization. Emmanuel Macron's diagnosis is clear. People, of course, are worried about globalization. They have the feeling it only benefits some parts of the country and society. They fear unemployment. Identity is a growing concern. Migration is a growing concern. But he and his government do not believe the solutions will come from closing our borders and having debates about our identity. The solution is to transform our economy within a more integrated Europe. The solution is to have a more competitive economy, able to provide jobs to everybody in France and to build a new French prosperity. Just a year ago, many would have said, including in his room, that France was incapable of change. Many were saying that we were the sick man of Europe, a stagnant economy, political turmoil, and averse to reforms and change. I think that we have proved them wrong in the past few months. We have moved quickly to implement the President's campaign manifesto, to remove the obstacles that have stopped France from fulfilling its potential for decades. We have reformed labor law. We have overhauled the tax system. And we are preparing the future of our country by changing the business environment, by cutting red tape, by investing massively in innovation, including in disruptive innovation, and by revamping our educational and vocational training systems. Because skills are the best protection a government can provide to its citizens. And we are doing our utmost to develop a new culture one that is more open to business, more open to risk-taking, one that embraces opportunities and changes. France is changing. France is back, and Europe is back. Let me start with a simple fact. Growth is back in the eurozone. Unemployment rates are falling within the eurozone. Countries that suffered most severely from the crisis are recovering. I mean Ireland, Portugal, Spain, even Greece. In France, we have reached a 2% growth rate. We now need to go further. Europe, first of all, needs to take the lead, not only on economic recovery, but on innovation. Innovation is the key if we want to remain in the race between China and the United States. The economic recovery is a necessity, but it won't be enough. The battle for innovation, the battle for disruptive innovation is the key if you want Europe to remain a leader between China and the United States. Let's be aware of that. The EU faces a clear choice on artificial intelligence, on space, on energy storage. We need to be global leaders, or we will go out of the historical race between China and the United States. In a few years' time, otherwise, our cars, our spaceships, our wind turbines will be operating solely with foreign technologies. That's the choice we have in our hands. Innovation is not only a matter of competitiveness. It is a matter of sovereignty and independence. And we want to be and to remain an independent country within an independent Europe, as much as you do. Independence is directly linked now to innovation and to the ability of having the possibility of developing new technologies. That's why we decided to create in France a 10 billion euro fund for disruptive innovations. That's the first time that such a fund has been created in France. It will be financed with the sales of public assets and revenues from privatizations. This fund should pave the way for a European fund. I know that many people are explaining, well, your fund is too narrow. It won't be enough to fund disruptive innovation, but it is a starting point. And I hope that in a few months, we will be able to create exactly the same kind of fund for disruptive innovation between France and Germany. And in a few years, I hope that we will be able to have exactly the same kind of fund among European partners, with the possibility of investing around 2 billion euros for disruptive innovation, as our American friends are able to do with the so-called DARPA. As Churchill said, either we take technological change by the hand, or it will take us by the throat. Europe stands also for free and fair trade. That's the second point on which I think that we should gather our efforts to try to convince our partners and to explain to the rest of the world that openness is a key, that free trade is the right track, and protectionism a dead end. Our strength is to be open, open to globalization, open to trade, open to investment. Investment fuels growth. It is what is best for society and the economy. This is why we are strong advocates of free and fair trade. Free because protectionism is the worst economic approach. It leads to less innovation, to lower competitiveness, to higher prices, and thus lower growth. Fair, because if we allow protectionism to rear its ugly head once again, or if we stick to to the sole pursuit of narrow self-interest, this can only lead to tensions, a race to the bottom on taxes, on trade, on social protection that will damage growth and damage the livelihood of our citizens. There will be only losers. That's why on steel and aluminium tariffs, Europe is determined to take appropriate measures, either to launch a procedure within the WTO or to adopt countermeasures if the American administration sticks to the plans it announced last week. I invite everyone to look at the history of trade wars. It is not a pretty sight. Trade wars make no winners in the long run. Let's not repeat the mistakes of history. Protectionism is a dead end. It leads to short-term gains and to long-term disasters. But let me be clear. Being open does not mean being naive, as we have been too often in the past. We can be both open and protect our strategic assets, those which are essential for our future and long-term autonomy. Protecting does not mean protectionism. We need to do that more assertively in Europe. That is why we fully support the European Commission's proposal for a European framework to screen foreign direct investments. If some foreign investor wants to buy a key technology, a strategic asset in the military field, for instance, we need to have the possibility to say no. Europe must have the courage to be open to foreign investment and to be always in the possibility to say no to an investment that might be a threat to a key technology or to a strategic asset. Europe has to show it is capable of both being open and defending its own interests. That's exactly what the United States and China have been doing for many years. It's time for Europe to change. It's time for Europe to be strong. It's time for Europe not only to comment the world, but to decide what we want the future to be. Europe needs to stand up for its values. What does this mean? It means inventing our own model, one that promotes our interests and abides by our core values, fairness and solidarity. I just give you two examples. First, the taxation of internet giants. Let me be very clear, we do not want to target any huge company. We are not targeting Google, Apple or Facebook or Amazon. These companies are mostly welcome in France and in Europe. Amazon has been creating more than 7,000 jobs in France. They are mostly welcome, but they have to pay their due taxes. I cannot ask the SMEs in France to pay their due local or national taxes and explain that for Amazon, they won't have to pay the same level of national or European taxes. Our plans in this area are not a move against specific American companies once again. It's about adapting our corporate tax system to the new economic reality, to a digitalized economy, and to ensure greater fairness for everybody. We simply can't go on with internet giants making huge profits in European countries and paying low amounts of taxes, because it is not fair and because it is also vital for the funding of public goods and service public everywhere in Europe. That's why it's vital that Europe acts and adopts an efficient and rapid solution by the end of 2018. Citizens won't understand if we don't. And I know that everybody has already explained to me, well, it will be too difficult. It's a tricky issue. Your French proposal is very interesting, but let's think a little bit more about an improvement of your proposal. No. Now it's time to decide. It's time to prove to our citizens that when it is a question of fairness, when what is at stake is fairness and efficiency at the international level, on the international stage, Europe is able to decide. Europe should not be afraid of deciding. Europe should not be afraid of its own economic, political, and I would say cultural power. Second example, cryptocurrencies. I'm a strong supporter of fintech and financial innovation more generally, including blockchain. France is a key player in that field. But being open to innovation does not mean forgetting a government's responsibilities towards its citizens. We have a duty to protect them against the creation of speculative bubbles, to warn them that bitcoins are risky assets, and finally, to make sure that those who trade in them abide by the same anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism standards as those trading any other financial asset. Once again, it's about fairness. Europe should be proud of its unique model. A model based on a single market open to the world combined with strong social values. A model including high levels of social protection and solidarity. Let's be proud of that. A model based on good education. Let's be proud of that. A model for good education for all and non-discrimination, to mention just a few pillars of that model. A model that has allowed us to avoid big rises in inequality. This is a key element of the European model. We are deeply convinced that inequalities are not only from a moral point of view something unacceptable, but from an economic point of view, a stupidity. And we are the single continent in the world able to defend that idea that we have to fight against the rise of inequalities. Inequalities not only among the nations of the world, but inequalities inside our nations. Because inequalities feed populism. Inequalities in our nations feed extremist parties. We all know that. We all have to draw the consequences of that reality. We should, for that reason, not be ashamed to promote our European model that gives a meaning to globalization. People are waiting for a sense, a meaning for globalization. Economic prosperity is not enough. Globalization, what for? Prosperity, what for? For education, for the fight against climate change, for the improvement of the situation of everybody, for the fight against inequalities, for the possibility of being open to other cultures. This is the meaning of globalization. But globalization only for the sake of being more and more greedy, making more and more money, creating more and more inequalities among nations and among people, this would be a non-starter for European nations. Last but not least, if we want to go this way, the eurozone needs to be in the forefront and needs to change. In recent years, the euro has been a source of fragility rather than a common asset for our economies. We did not finish off the job of building the monetary union when we created it. This is one of the reasons why the financial crisis turned into a eurozone crisis. Our top priority is to transform the economic and monetary union, to make it an anchor of stability and prosperity in the world. The eurozone is much more resilient than it was, but it still needs to be complemented. First steps, a fully fledged banking union, including a backstop to manage effectively a future banking crisis, and a genuine single market for capital. This will be even more important